There is so much negativity in the world today. And I find myself asking, why? Why is there so much negativity everywhere? And I came across this passage of Scripture in 1 Thessalonians. Paul wrote this to some Christians in a city way back when. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, Paul said, love one another. And he tells them then to love one another and do that love. He says, do it more and more. So love one another more and more, he says. And he says, aspire to live quietly and to mind your own affairs. So what Paul is doing is he's setting up the command to love one another against this rejection of being in the affairs of others. He said, mind your own affairs. So don't be in other people's business. Don't gossip about other people. Don't talk negatively about other people, whether in word or even in your own mind. You can talk negatively about someone and how you think about them. He says, rather than doing that stuff, rather than minding the affairs of somebody else, love one another more and more. Paul says in 1 Timothy chapter 5 that people who don't love, but rather mind the affairs of others, he says it's those kind of people who say things they ought not to say. And so back here to 1 Thessalonians, Paul wants us to love rather than say things we shouldn't say, rather than be in the business of other people, rather than constantly criticize and be negative about other people. He says, love them. And Jesus gave that command as well to his disciples in John chapter 13. Jesus said, a new commandment I give to you, to love one another. Now, he doesn't just stop there. He says, love one another as I have loved you. Now, what makes this so fascinating is interesting is back in Leviticus, the command was love your neighbor as yourself. And what that does, that command, love your neighbor as yourself, that puts the limitation of your love on you, on how much you can love, on how much you can do. Love your neighbor as much as you can. But Jesus' command in John chapter 13 was love as I love. That's beyond what you do. That's beyond what you're capable of. He says, love as I love. Now, to add a whole new layer to this, right? I mean, Jesus just told his disciples, kick up your love a notch. Love your neighbor as yourself. Let's kick that up a notch and let's go to loving like I love. Me, Jesus, who is the Son of God. Love like I love. But what adds the new layer to this is Jesus says this right after Judas walks out of the upper room to go and betray Jesus. So Judas leaves to go betray Jesus, and Jesus looks at his other disciples in the room and says, I'm giving you a new command, love everybody the same way that I love. Now that's intense. It's almost as though he's saying, this guy who just left to go betray me, this guy who's going to go do what he's going to do, don't speak poorly of him, don't treat him in a bad way, love him. Like Jesus said in Matthew 5, love your enemies. Love him. Make an active, conscious decision to love him. I mean, imagine how the world would be different if people loved each other the way Jesus did. Just for a second, imagine how the world would be different if just Christians did that. Loved people the way Jesus loved people. Didn't speak to people the way we do on social media, didn't drop all these criticisms and negativity on social media. I mean, the media does that for us. I mean, there's negativity everywhere. It's all over the news because negativity sells. It's all over documentaries that drop on streaming services because negativity sells, and more people are going to watch that because when we watch negativity about somebody else, it makes us feel better about ourselves. That's why we spread it as quickly as we do. But Jesus says, in contrast to that, right? 1 Thessalonians 4. Don't be in the business of others. Be in the business of God and love each other. And so the challenge I would give you then is love one another this week. Find somebody, find anybody, and love them. Love them. Somebody that God has put in your way, and love them the way Jesus does. And just see how your world changes. See how their world changes, first of all, as they're encountering that love, that action that you are extending to them in kind words, in prayer, in paying for their lunch, in dropping an anonymous encouraging note, sending them a text of encouragement, a social media post of encouragement or DM of encouragement. See how it changes their world, but see how it changes your outlook when you begin to view the world in terms of the love of Jesus. Everything will change, and your world will be better, and the world at large will be better, because a little more love of Jesus will be introduced into the world around us.